The first person to see the camera didn't think much of it. A compact Canon, dirt-smudged but intact, resting precariously near the edge of a granite cliff in the Catskill Mountains. It was late October, the kind of day when the air feels heavy with silence, and the colors of dying leaves look almost too bright. A couple from Albany had been hiking the Overlook Mountain Trail, easy terrain, popular with tourists, when they stopped for water and noticed the object in the rocks. At first, they thought it was trash. Then they saw the strap, tangled around a branch. The woman picked it up, thinking maybe someone had dropped it recently. But the camera wasn't new. It was cold, slightly warped by weather, and caked in dust. She flipped it over and saw something odd. A faint pink sticker on the bottom with a name handwritten in marker, S. Grayson. She almost dropped it. That name had been in the news. Samantha Grayson, 22 years old, had vanished 6 months earlier during a weekend trip with friends. A senior at NYU, she was majoring in environmental journalism, working on a final project about disappearing wilderness zones in upstate New York. Her plan was to document how popular trails were suffering from overuse and erosion, how the human footprint was wearing down places meant to feel untouched. The Catskills had always fascinated her. She told friends it was the only place that still felt like it kept secrets. Her group, 4 students total, had rented a cabin near Phoenicia for the weekend. They arrived on a Friday, hiked all day Saturday, and by Sunday morning, Samantha was gone. No note, no calls. Her phone had been left charging by her bed. Her hiking boots were missing, but not her jacket. She wasn't known to wander off. Her friends assumed she'd gone for a solo walk. But when she didn't return by sundown, panic set in. The discovery of her camera 6 months later changed everything. Not just because it proved she'd been somewhere further out than search teams had explored, but because of what was inside it. The SD card, surprisingly, still worked. Police reviewed the photos immediately. Most were what you'd expect. Trail shots, trees, rock formations, a selfie near a rusted fire tower. The last photo, however, didn't match the others. It was taken from the cliff's edge where the camera was found, pointed slightly downward. The image showed a narrow ridge below the rock ledge, and something on it. A shadow. A shape. Something hard to define. Police enhanced it, brightened it, tried to analyze the depth. Some believed it was just a boulder. Others saw something more human. A figure. Bent at the waist. Head turned. Unmoving. The media latched onto the photo within days. Haunting last image of missing student, read one headline. Camera found on cliff may hold clue to Grayson disappearance, read another. Samantha's parents, who had clung to hope she was alive, now faced a darker possibility, that she had fallen. Or jumped. Or been pushed. But something didn't add up. According to GPS data, that specific ledge wasn't on any trail. It was a dangerous detour, off-route from where Samantha's group had hiked. And her friends all swore she had never mentioned going out there. Police began to ask a new question. Not just where she had gone, but why. Samantha Grayson wasn't the kind of person who disappeared. That's what her professors said. What her parents insisted. What her friends repeated again and again during the early days of the investigation. She was smart, top of her class. Driven, meticulous, and fiercely independent, but not reckless. She planned everything in notebooks. What to pack, where to eat, even when to leave buffer time in her hikes in case of bad weather. She was the responsible one among her group, always checking the forecast and printing physical maps in case her phone died. Her disappearance didn't fit. Not to the people who knew her. Her mother, Helen Grayson, told reporters that Samantha had never even skipped a class, let alone vanished in the woods without telling anyone. She had a plan for everything, she said. And even if something went wrong, she would have left a clue. The 4 friends who had gone on the trip with her were all cleared after brief but intense questioning. No signs of foul play. No arguments. 2 of them had gone to a nearby town for supplies that morning. 1 had stayed back at the cabin. Samantha was last seen around 8:30 a.m., lacing up her boots on the porch, a thermos in her hand, a camera around her neck. She'd said she was going to get a few shots of the ridge before breakfast. That was the phrase all three of them remembered. The ridge. The problem was, the only ridge marked on the nearby trails was part of the giant ledge path, about a 2-hour hike from their cabin. She didn't have food. She didn't pack a bag. And she never took her phone. To most people, that would seem careless. But to those who knew Samantha, it felt intentional. Investigators initially believed she might have gotten lost. The terrain beyond Giant Ledge is notoriously uneven. Rocky drop-offs, dense undergrowth, and sudden fog that rolls in without warning. Dogs picked up her scent for a short distance but lost it just before a narrow trail forked away from the main route. That offshoot led toward an unmarked section known by locals as Graver's Hollow, a seldom visited gorge known for steep cliffs and, more ominously, a series of disappearances going back to the 1970s. But that wasn't public information at the time. It wasn't on any official map. And Samantha, sitter-raised, methodical, would have had no reason to know about it. Unless someone told her. Or unless something drew her there. As the hours turned to days, then weeks, the search expanded. Drones scanned the mountainside. Helicopters circled for signs of her red hiking jacket. Nothing. No footprints. No dropped gear. No body. Her family offered a $50,000 reward. Billboards went up from New York to Albany. Her case made national news. Then, gradually, the silence returned. And like most stories that don't get answers, Samantha Grayson's name began to fade. Until the camera appeared. That small black Canon, covered in dust, balancing near a cliff like it had been set down with care, or dropped during something no one saw. Now, with the final photo going viral and experts split on what it showed, public interest surged again. Some amateur investigators claimed the shadow in the image was Samantha herself. Others believed it was someone else, someone watching her. But even more unsettling was the timestamp on the photo. It had been taken at 10:42 a.m., over 2 hours after her friends said she left, and nearly 30 minutes after her last known location, according to nearby trail cam footage. If Samantha took that final photo, what happened right after she clicked the shutter? Within 48 hours of the photo being released to the public, online forums exploded. Reddit threads appeared with thousands of comments. Amateur sleuths used mapping tools to pinpoint the exact ledge. Some even traveled to the Catskills themselves, hoping to find what police had missed. On Twitter, the hashtag #WhereIsSamantha trended for 3 days straight. Theories flourished like wildfire. Some believed she'd staged her disappearance, using the photo as a final breadcrumb. Others were convinced she'd been followed, pointing to a faint blur in the upper left corner of the image that resembled a second figure, partially obscured by trees. A few more fringe theories began to emerge too, some referencing older stories from the same area. Hikers who vanished mid-trail, campers who left tents behind like they'd been plucked from the world. The Grayson family, overwhelmed by renewed media pressure, decided to take a step no one expected. They hired a private search and recovery team, one with backgrounds in both forensic analysis and remote wilderness tracking. The team, led by retired Ranger Colton Hale, had previously worked cold cases in the Rockies and the Sierra Nevada. Hale didn't believe in paranormal explanations, but he did believe in patterns. After studying the location of the camera, the timestamps on the photos, and the trail cam data, he made a chilling observation. Samantha's route didn't align with any known hiking trail. Instead, she seemed to have followed an old firebreak line, a type of rough, unmarked clearing once used for emergency access during forest fires. These lines weren't on any modern hiker apps, but they were visible, if you knew where to look. Hale and his team revisited the area around the cliff edge, scanning for anything that might have been missed the first time. And after several days of combing through brush and scree, they found something that had no business being there. About 300 feet downslope from where the camera had been, wedged between two boulders, was a thin strip of fabric, red, torn at the edge. Forensics later confirmed it matched the same brand and color of jacket Samantha had worn that day. It wasn't conclusive, but it placed her much further down than anyone had assumed. And it raised a terrifying possibility that she had fallen, or been pushed, or run. The discovery reignited the case, but it also fractured the narrative. If she had fallen, why hadn't search dogs caught her scent near the drop? Why was the camera found neatly perched above, undamaged? Some theorized that she had climbed down intentionally, lost footing, and dropped the camera during the fall. But Hale wasn't convinced. He believed the positioning of the camera was too deliberate. It wasn't tossed, he told the family. It was set down, like someone wanted it to be found. Or someone else placed it there. That sentence haunted Helen Grayson for days. She started to look back at things Samantha had said weeks before the trip. A strange phone call. A cryptic text. The Catskills are louder than they look. You just have to be still long enough to hear it. At the time, it sounded poetic. Now, it sounded like a warning. Buried in the Cannon's memory card, beneath the photos and behind a locked folder mislabeled as system_cache, was a single video file. The file was only 43 seconds long, shot vertically, with no thumbnail preview. It had no title. The private investigator's digital forensics specialist nearly missed it. But once decrypted, it became the most chilling piece of evidence in the entire case. The video, dated the morning of Samantha's disappearance, began with a shaky frame, sunlight flaring across the lens, rocks crunching underfoot, and the unmistakable sound of wind cutting sharply through the trees. Then, her voice. Quiet, uncertain, like she was whispering to herself. Okay, it's steeper than I thought. But I'm close. I can see it from here. A pause. More footsteps. I don't think this is even on the map. There's no trail anymore. I don't know how they... Another pause. Her breathing speeds up. I think someone's been here. There's a boot print. Not mine. Not fresh either. But big. The camera swings briefly, capturing only sky and branches. Then her voice again, barely audible now. I swear I just heard something. I'm probably being paranoid. But this doesn't feel right. Then, static. The clip ends abruptly. No scream. No impact. No final message. Just silence, and then black. Investigators confirmed it had been recorded on the same morning she vanished, just under an hour before the last photo on the camera was taken. That placed the video somewhere between the cabin and the cliff, likely along the firebreak path Hale had traced. But what disturbed her family most wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Samantha's voice wasn't the confident, matter-of-fact tone they knew. It trembled. It wandered. It sounded off. Like she knew something was wrong. Like she had seen something she couldn't explain. The boot print mentioned in the clip became the next focus. Hale's team returned to the area, trying to find any trace of it. But the 6 months of weather had long erased whatever might have been there. Still, Hale believed her. She was an observer, he said. If she said she saw something, I trust that she did. For Samantha's father, that was both comforting and terrifying. Who did the boot belong to? Another hiker? A stranger? Someone watching her from the trees? The area around the cliff wasn't popular. In fact, it had been described in a 1993 forestry report as hazardous and unsuitable for recreational travel. Yet Samantha had gone there. Deliberately. As if following something. The video was never officially released to the public, but it didn't matter. Word spread quickly. Podcasts began speculating about what Samantha saw. Some believed she had stumbled onto an illegal campsite. Others thought she'd uncovered something more sinister, like evidence of someone else's crime. A few more extreme theories posited she'd fallen into some kind of trap, lured away from the trail by something or someone who knew how to remain invisible. Samantha's cryptic final words, "This doesn't feel right," became a viral refrain. People printed it on shirts, turned it into stickers, and whispered it while hiking in the same mountains. It was no longer just a phrase. It was a warning. The cliff where Samantha's camera was found didn't have a name on modern maps, but locals had one, Widow's Turn. According to old hikers, the name came from a story passed around campfires and backwoods bars, about a woman in the 1930s who supposedly lost her husband off that same ledge. Whether the tale was true or just folklore didn't matter. The name stuck. And more importantly, The pattern it suggested began to catch the attention of people like Colton Hale, who specialized in wilderness disappearance clusters. In the days after Samantha's story resurfaced, Hale started digging through incident reports, some going back to the 1960s. What he found unsettled even him. At least 4 other disappearances had occurred within a 1-mile radius of that same ridgeline, all of them hikers or campers, all of them with one strange detail in common. Their gear was later found neatly placed. Not scattered, not destroyed by wildlife, but set down, like someone had carefully removed their pack, their shoes, or their camera, and never picked them back up. In one 1978 case, a teenage boy named Ryan Lutz went missing while birdwatching. His binoculars were found weeks later, still hanging from a low branch on the cliff's western slope. In another case from 1991, a solo hiker's journal was recovered inside a Ziploc bag, placed under a stone at the trail's edge. His last entry read, "I keep hearing footsteps, but no one's ever there. Might head back tomorrow. Or not." He was never seen again. None of those stories had gone national. They'd been quietly closed by overstretched park rangers or written off as accidents. But now, with Samantha's name in every headline, these older cases began to resurface. Online communities began connecting dots. Maps of the Catskills were overlaid with pins, showing disappearances clustered like constellations around a few key spots. And Widow's Turn, the unmarked cliff where Samantha's camera sat, was at the center. Some said it was just coincidence. Others believed the land had a kind of memory, a pull. "There's something about that place," one retired ranger said anonymously to a journalist. "The air's different up there. Quiet in a way that feels watched." Samantha's family didn't believe in folklore. Not at first. But when Hale showed them a hand-drawn map from 1952, recovered from a defunct ranger station, something shifted. On that yellowed paper, scribbled in fading pencil, were several marked danger zones. One of them matched the location of the cliff. And next to it, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Avoid ledge. Unstable ground. Animals stay clear." No one had recorded that in modern safety guides. It had been forgotten, until now. The implication wasn't supernatural. It was stranger, that something had been known, and then allowed to be forgotten. For the Graysons, it was another wound. Not only had Samantha disappeared, but the place where she vanished might have always been dangerous. And still, no body, no signal. Just a photo, a video, and a question that refused to die. If she walked willingly into that silence, what was she hoping to find? The break came from a source no one expected. A wildlife researcher at a nearby university had been conducting a long-term study on black bear migration through the Catskills. He'd placed motion-activated trail cameras throughout the forest, some in official locations, some in undocumented corners, set to record both video and audio. Months after Samantha's disappearance, long before the camera had been found, he had captured footage of a bear family moving through the area just east of Widow's Turn. He catalogued the clips, tagged the data, and archived the files. It wasn't until after the story resurfaced in the news that he remembered one odd recording. One he hadn't labeled. Something that had seemed irrelevant, until it didn't. The footage, timestamped 10:47 a.m., just 5 minutes after the final photo on Samantha's camera, was shaky, mostly static trees and leaves. A branch shifts, something moves in the distance, and then, just barely over the wind, a voice. It's female. Breathy. Strained. One word. Wait. Then silence. No other sounds. No footsteps. No reply. Just wind through the pines. But the voice was real. Audio engineers enhanced the clip, ran it through filtering tools, and compared it to Samantha's earlier recordings. The match wasn't perfect, but it was close enough that experts couldn't rule it out. The voice had the same tone, the same cadence. And more than that, the location of the trail cam, just 400 yards from the cliff's edge, lined up with where her final photo would have been taken. If it was her, it meant one terrifying thing. Samantha was still alive minutes after that final image. The clip was never made public. It was shared only with the family and authorities, but the leak was inevitable. Within a week, An anonymous Reddit account posted a cleaned-up audio file, sparking new firestorms of speculation. People tried to lip-read the blurry clip, imagining what else she might have said. Some heard, "Wait, stop." Others claimed there were second whispers buried underneath, a male voice, too soft to decipher. But the forensic team found no evidence of other voices. Just that single word. One that could mean anything. She could have been talking to a person. Or to herself. Or, more disturbingly, reacting to something she saw. Hale's team returned to the forest once more, now armed with the full map of camera placements, timestamps, and trajectory models. They traced the route backward from the trail cam, down through a thin ravine, and found something else. A shallow indentation in the soil near an overturned log. Not quite a grave. Not quite a bed. But large enough for a person to have crouched, or hidden, or waited. Next to it was a water bottle, degraded, algae-stained, and branded with a logo from a hiking store in Manhattan. Samantha's mother confirmed it had been hers. Now there was a new question haunting the case. If she was hiding, from who? It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. No postmark. Just the Grayson family's last name printed in shaky block letters and delivered directly to their mailbox in Brooklyn, 3 days after the trail cam audio leaked online. At first, Helen Grayson assumed it was another cruel message. Since the media storm reignited, the family had received dozens of emails, comments, and even a few letters from strangers claiming to know what happened to Samantha. Most were hoaxes. Some were simply disturbed ramblings. But this one felt different. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of ruled paper, neatly folded, with handwriting that seemed careful, even reluctant. The note wasn't threatening. It wasn't dramatic. It was plain, which somehow made it worse. I saw her once. I think. Last fall. At a gas station off Route 28 near the Catskills. She was alone. Looked nervous. Like she was watching the parking lot more than shopping. She bought trail mix and batteries. She dropped her change. I picked it up for her. I remember because she said, "I never go anywhere without extra power." I didn't know who she was until I saw her face on the news. I didn't talk to anyone because I wasn't sure. But now, I think it was her. I'm sorry. No name. No phone number. Nothing to verify. But the detail about the batteries struck a nerve. Samantha was obsessive about backup power. Her father said she always carried 2 sets of extras for her camera and 1 for her headlamp. That phrase, "I never go anywhere without extra power," was something only someone close to her, or someone who truly met her, would know. For investigators, it added a new layer of time to the case. If the letter was truthful, it meant Samantha had visited the Catskills once before the group trip. Alone. And told no one. Helen and Charles Grayson were stunned. Samantha had never mentioned a prior solo trip. Her calendar had no notes. Her journal made no reference. But when Hale reviewed her credit card records, something clicked. A small gas purchase at a station just outside Woodstock, New York, dated September 12th, nearly 5 weeks before the group hike. She'd been there. But why? And why didn't she tell anyone? The most logical explanation was that she was scouting. That she'd visited the area ahead of time to plan her photography project. But if that was true, it still didn't explain her behavior during the weekend with her friends. Why leave her phone behind? Why head off trail? Why keep her previous trip a secret? That was when Hale decided to re-interview Samantha's roommate at NYU, a friend named Maya who had initially provided the cabin rental details. At first, Maya had no new information. But when pressed about anything Samantha had mentioned that felt off, she hesitated. Then she said one thing. There was this guy. He emailed her twice about the project. She thought it was a fellow student, but his name wasn't on the rolls. He said he wanted to show her the real Catskills. She never replied. But she didn't delete the emails either. That name, Luke Marlin, didn't belong to any enrolled student at NYU. And the email account had since been deactivated. Who was he? And was he ever in the woods? When Colton Hale ran the name Luke Marlin through NYU databases, DMV records, and known email providers, nothing came back. No student ID, no public social media, no credit history. Just the trail of a Gmail account created 6 weeks before Samantha's disappearance and deleted 2 days after she vanished. The 2 emails he'd sent her were simple, almost too casual. The first said, "I'm also doing a piece on the Catskills. I have access to areas no one documents anymore. Want to swap notes?" The second, sent 5 days later, was even more unsettling. "People only disappear when they go looking in the wrong places. Let me know if you're serious about this project." There was no response from Samantha on either. But in her laptop's draft folder, Hale found a half-written reply she'd never sent. "Hi. Appreciate the offer, but I tend to work solo. Also, I've never heard of you. Are you part of another school's program?" It ended mid-sentence, unsent. The timestamp showed it had been started at 2:17 a.m. 2 weeks before the trip. The fact that she didn't send it, and didn't delete it, suggested something. Maybe hesitation. Maybe fear. Hale started reaching out to rangers, search and rescue volunteers, even former wilderness instructors in the region. He asked them one question. Had anyone ever heard of a Luke Marlin? Most said no. But one name kept coming up, Luther Luke Marlin, a survivalist and former guide who had led off-grid treks through the Catskills in the late 1990s and early 2000s. He had vanished from the scene after a controversial incident in 2005 involving a missing camper under his care. No charges were filed. No body was found. But his reputation never recovered. The problem was, Luke Marlin had reportedly died in 2009, after his cabin burned down in a remote section of Ulster County. Or so people thought. The property records showed something odd. The land where his cabin once stood hadn't been sold. It hadn't been claimed. In fact, there was no official record of it at all. Just a set of handwritten coordinates in a ranger's old field book, logged during a fire assessment in 2004. Hale and his team followed those coordinates. The trek was brutal. Steep inclines, overgrown brush, no real path. But after several hours, they found it. The charred remains of a single-room cabin, half swallowed by the woods. The foundation was cracked. The roof had collapsed. But inside, under a broken rafter, was a rusted metal box sealed with duct tape. Inside were scorched notebooks, a compass, and several film canisters. Most of the pages were too damaged to read. But one entry was still intact. It read, "They come here looking for quiet. But this place doesn't want them. It lets them think they're alone, but it watches. I've told them not to wander past the ridge." That's where she heard it too. Who she was, and whether the writing belonged to Luke Marlin, remained uncertain. Handwriting analysis was inconclusive. But the style, the paranoia, and the mention of the ridge, so close to Widow's Turn, sent a chill through everyone involved. It hinted that Samantha wasn't the first to be lured in. And maybe, she hadn't been alone when she went off trail. The soil beneath Widow's Turn wasn't easy to dig. It was dry near the surface, but heavy with clay underneath. Dense, reluctant, almost defiant. But Hale's team had reason to try. Using drone imaging and ground-penetrating radar borrowed from a nearby university's geology department, they had isolated a shallow anomaly just 50 yards below the cliff's edge. It looked like a natural sink. Nothing obvious, no debris. But the radar showed subtle disruptions in the sediment layers. Something had shifted the ground there. And it hadn't happened recently. It took them most of a day to clear it. First, the leaves. Then the top layer of dry dirt. Then the thick clumps of root-bound clay. A few feet down, one of the team members struck something soft but fibrous. At first they thought it was tree matter, until they realized it was fabric. Red nylon. Faded. Torn at one side. Hale paused, his hand hovering over the patch of color as the team fell silent. They all knew what they were seeing. Slowly, carefully, they continued. Beneath the nylon was the outline of a body, collapsed inward over time, bones scattered, but intact enough to suggest it hadn't been disturbed by wildlife. Her ID was still in a zipped pocket. Her hiking boots were present, still laced. Her wristwatch had stopped at 11:23 a.m. It was Samantha. 6 months missing. Now found. But the relief was short-lived. There was no trauma to the skull. No broken bones in the arms or legs. No signs of a fall. And most notably, no damage that matched the distance from the cliff's edge. She hadn't tumbled. She hadn't been thrown. She had walked down into that hollow, laid herself down, curled up, and never got back up. For the forensic pathologist, the official cause of death was inconclusive. Dehydration was likely. Exposure, maybe. There were trace amounts of sleep aids in her system, but not enough to kill her. And no signs of struggle. The only irregularity was that her camera had not been with her. That meant one thing: someone moved it. Someone had returned to the cliff after she died and placed it in plain view. Whether to help or to mislead, no one could say. The final mystery was her journal. It wasn't on her body, but 10 feet away, buried under a flat stone like she meant to leave it. Only the last 2 pages were legible. I tried to find the quiet place again. It's like it moved. I heard the same sound from last time. Low, like breath. But nothing was there. I don't know where the others went. I think someone's following me. I'm not scared. But I don't think I'm supposed to leave. Not yet. That single line, "the others," rattled Hale the most. There had been no reports of other hikers missing that weekend. And yet she wrote it as if she'd seen them. Or thought she did. The final page simply said, "It's watching now. I hear it everywhere." They buried Samantha Grayson on a gray afternoon in late spring, under a soft drizzle that made the cemetery grass shine like frost. Her casket was closed. Not because she was unrecognizable. Her body had been surprisingly preserved, but because her parents wanted the world to remember her as she had been. Bright-eyed, camera in hand, chasing light through canopies. A quiet memorial followed. No press. No cameras. Just the family, a few close friends, and the sound of wind slipping through the trees. Her mother read a passage from Samantha's favorite book, Thoreau, naturally, and her father stood in silence, holding her red jacket, now faded to the color of clay. The investigation was officially closed the following week. The report read accidental death, likely caused by exposure. But Hale never signed off emotionally. He'd worked dozens of wilderness disappearances. This one left splinters. There were too many shadows around the facts. The mystery man, Luke Marlin, was never located. The scorched journal remained in evidence custody. And the camera, though now returned to the family, was missing several files. The SD card had been tampered with at some point. Whether by nature, corruption, or another hand, no one could say. But what disturbed Hale most was something subtle. During his final sweep of the site, just before packing up their base camp, one of his team members found a second camera lens half buried in moss near the old firebreak line. It didn't match Samantha's Canon. It was older. Scratched. Possibly decades old. There were no identifying marks. Just dust and silence. As if someone had stood in that exact spot before her. As if she wasn't the first. And maybe not the last. Today, hikers still visit the Catskills, drawn by the endless trees, the winding ridges, the promise of quiet. But those who know the story, the real story, don't linger near Widow's Turn. The cliff is harder to reach now. The path, once visible through broken brush, has vanished under regrowth. Like the land itself wants to forget. Or perhaps protect. Samantha's name lives on in a scholarship fund for young female journalists. Her final photos hang in the university's environmental sciences hallway. Soft, glowing shots of forest light and shadow. Beautiful. Unnerving. And always slightly tilted. As though the trees weren't just standing still, but leaning in to listen. And somewhere, high above the ledge where her last photo was taken, wind still moves through the pines. Not fast. Not loud. Just enough to make someone, anyone, look back. Just enough to make them think they're being watched.